Lockdown, lockdown. This is an emergency alert. Please follow lockdown procedures. Go into the nearest room or building, lock the door, and turn off all lights. Wait for the all clear from school officials or local authorities. Lockdown, lockdown.
Even though this happened years ago, I am still recovering from it. At the time, I was an art teacher. Like any teacher in any school these days, I had a great number of students, but luckily, most of them were good kids. That year, however, I had one student I will never forget. For confidentiality purposes, I will refer to him as Douglas. He wasn't a bad kid all the time, though his behavior was complicated by his disorder. Douglas was diagnosed with autism, but with that being said, I want to stress something important. As a teacher of over 15 years, I've seen hundreds of kids struggle and grow up with various mental disorders, autism included. I know these things don't make people evil, which is why I truly believe Douglas had something much worse going on with him. One day, the final dismissal bell rang. All my students got up and left at the same time. I began to clear my desk so I could grade some assignments, but then I noticed something odd out of the corner of my eye. Douglas had not left. He was still sitting, staring at his desk. I told him he was allowed to go home. He didn't respond at all. He just had this twisted look on his face with this over-exaggerated smile. I didn't have a clue how to handle the situation, so I just backed off and left him alone. I could feel him staring at me as I walked back to my desk, but I sat down and began grading papers, trying my best to ignore him. A few moments later, the lights went out. I looked up at Douglas's desk, but he wasn't there. He was standing by the door, blocking the light coming in from the hallway. In the near pitch darkness, I couldn't see his face, but I knew he was standing in front of the light switch and looking dead at me. I tried to stay calm and talk to Douglas, but I could tell there was an entirely different side coming out of him.
Douglas, why'd you turn off the lights? Yes, that's very funny, but could you turn them back on? I can't see what I'm working on here.
I can see you just fine. You're looking very murderable.
Douglas, that is not okay to say.
Shut up! I've been waiting forever for this.
For what? Douglas?
Out of nowhere, the lights came back on, revealing a colleague who had opened the door and flicked on the lights behind Douglas. Thanks to them, Douglas finally left my classroom and went home like he was supposed to. That left me alone to think about what just happened. Part of me knew something was seriously wrong, but like I said, I preferred to deal with things on my own, so I didn't report the incident. I just planned to talk to him about it later when he was in a more agreeable mood. Unfortunately, I never got the chance. During my break period the following day, I was sitting at my desk, grading papers like usual. The Douglas incident was still in the back of my mind, but we weren't due to see each other for a few more hours. At that moment, there were a few other students in my class, just a handful of my more attentive pupils who liked to spend their lunch alone in a quiet room like mine. Those students were allowed to come and go to the bathroom as they pleased, so when I heard the door open, I didn't even bother to glance. Seconds later, I felt an immense pain in my chest. It was like I'd been socked by a bodybuilder. But then I looked to my right and saw Douglas standing right there. He was holding a knife and laughing. Then I looked and felt where he had hit me and realized he had stabbed me. As I sat there stunned and Douglas kept laughing, the other students began screaming and running for their lives. The moment we were alone, my brain finally kicked into survival mode. I jumped out of my chair and ran to the door. Douglas chased after me, but I managed to close the door in his face just in time, without missing a beat. He started trying to stab his way through the door. In fear of myself or anyone else getting hit again, I ran from the door as soon as my coworker came to help. I told them to forget about it and run. Some of them led me to a safe location to hide, but nobody could stop Douglas. He roamed the halls freely, then disappeared. In the minutes after, the school went into total lockdown. It was too dangerous to leave or enter the school until Douglas was found. Those were the longest minutes of my life, wondering if things would work in my favor or if I was going to bleed out before it was too late. Douglas was arrested and I was taken to the hospital to get treatment. Douglas was sentenced to 2 years in custody. His lawyer's main defense was that Douglas's autism was to blame, but I don't believe that's all there is to it. Nobody decides they want to be a killer just because they're autistic. Ever since then, I've been recovering physically and mentally. After what happened, I don't think I can ever go back to teaching. a high school student pleaded guilty to the attempted murder of an art teacher in Quebec and was sentenced to 2 years in custody at a youth center and 1 year of surveillance. The teen stabbed the teacher at John F. Kennedy High School in Montreal's St. Michael neighborhood last December. The teacher who was stabbed was 42-year-old Maxime Canul. The school went into lockdown after the stabbing and the student was arrested about an hour later. The stabbing took place on December 9th of 2021 at around 10 a.m., which was witnessed by students who reported seeing a teenager walk into the class, stab Canul twice and then run away. Canul suffered an injury to his chest and shoulder, and his wounds were initially believed by paramedics to be life-threatening. He was taken to hospital and had to undergo surgery. A spokesperson for the ambulance said Canul was lucky to be alive. The lawyer representing the teen said there had been a lack of support services at the school for several years, and there were problems related to autism spectrum disorder that brought him to having a deformed vision of reality of what was going on. Canul said afterward that he is considering leaving the profession after 16 years of teaching.
Lockdown, lockdown. This is an emergency alert. Please follow lockdown procedures. Go into the nearest room or building.
About 7 years ago, I was in my sophomore year in high school. Everyone knew about these two kids named Bobby and Jay. Bobby was the jock type, popular and charismatic, but he was a real dick, and he always had his friends around to gas him up. Jay was the polar opposite. He was a loner, and rough around the edges in more ways than one. Rumor has it that the pair had beef with one another. At the start of the school year this all happened. Bobby popularized picking on Jay. He would make fun of Jay in front of crowds of people, posted heinous things about him online, and somehow made it cool to be an unrelenting asshole to this one kid in particular. Now, that's not to say Jay was totally submissive and innocent. Rather, his attempts at defending himself were usually counterproductive. His willingness to fight coupled with his lack of skills or athleticism made their confrontations a source of school-wide entertainment. The way it went was that Bobby would stop Jay in the halls and start insulting him. Jay could never clap back or just walk away, so he'd square up to fight. After he got baited, Bobby and his friends would jump him. I'll admit, I watched a few of these fights myself and wanted to help Jay, not to fight with him, just pull him out. I felt bad always seeing him outnumbered and rooted against, but then again, I didn't want to be the next victim, so I would just watch like everyone else. Unfortunately, that wasn't the end of it. It was after school on a Friday. I remember stopping by the grocery store near school for a snack and a drink. As I was looking around, I saw Bobby and his friends picking on Jay again. They had him cornered in the entrance to the bathrooms at the back of the store. Nobody else was around to watch or help, just me. So I finally spoke up for Jay, only it didn't turn out the way I hoped.
Leave me alone! I don't want to do this!
Come on, pussy, let's run the fade!
No!
Hey, don't you guys ever get bored of kicking this kid's ass? Stay out, loser, unless you're here to make it more interesting. I'm just saying, 3-on-1 is kinda cringe. Why don't you get in here and even the odds then?
While Bobby and his friends were looking at me, Jay went for a cheap shot and hit Bobby in the face. That's when the other guys immediately jumped the shit out of him. I watched in shock at first, but then it got worse. One of them pulled out their phone and started to record. While dragging him into the bathroom, Jay was kicking and screaming and begging for help. But in the end, he got locked in the bathroom with the bullies, and I ran off like a coward. By the time I got home, the video of what they did to Jay in there was already doing numbers on Bobby's story. They beat him to a bloody pulp and plastered it all over the internet. On Monday, everyone was waiting to see what Jay's reaction would be. I thought he might not even show up, but he did. The crowd gathered around him as soon as he stepped foot onto campus, but when Bobby appeared, Jay did not show any of his usual emotion. Everyone was waiting for the fight to break out, yet the moment Bobby threatened him, Jay reached into his bag and pulled out a gun. Screams erupted from every direction so loud it was almost deafening. Just as the crowd shifted to run the hell away, Jay fired the gun. The shot was my signal to not look back as I desperately ran, trying to fight my way through the raging stampede of people. I looked for the first place I could hide. That's when I ducked inside a janitor's closet, just as two other kids were shutting the door to lock themselves inside with me. We could still hear the pandemonium all throughout the school. Then the lockdown call came. As we waited inside there, all we could do was pray that Jay wouldn't come for us. All I remember was hearing the lockdown alert, people screaming, and my raging heartbeat pulsing through my chest. After a horrific few minutes, everything slowly died out, dwindling to a tense, heavy silence. I then cracked the door open to watch the hallway through the slit. And that's when I saw Jay for the last time. He was running, and still had that gun in his hands. I ducked back in as I heard another shot. I never thought I was going to get out of that janitor's closet alive. But then after a grueling few more minutes, the lockdown was finally lifted. Jay was nowhere to be found. However, the same could not be said for Bobby. His body was discovered right where it had all started that morning. He died before anyone could get to him. When Jay was later arrested, he said that he brought the gun to school for protection, knowing Bobby would try to fight him again. Honestly, I don't know if that's true or not. Sure, Jay was scared and traumatized, but part of me thinks that even if Bobby went up to apologize that morning, he still would have gotten taken out on sight. Sometimes, I think the second shot might have been meant for me. A feud led one student to bring a stolen firearm to a North Carolina high school, and a sophomore classmate ended up dead. Bobby McKeithen, a student at Butler High School, was fatally taken out by Jatwan Craig Cuffey, a freshman, after a fight in a hallway shortly after 7 a.m. on Monday. Jatwan was charged with first-degree murder and held without bail. The suspect painted a story of a scared teen who had been in a fight days prior and brought the firearm to school for protection. The altercation was building up days before the shooting, and that several people knew it might come to a head on Monday. School officials said it was a case of bullying that spiraled out of control. But Bobby's father told reporters that his son was never a bully and that his friends and teachers will confirm that. Allegedly, Jatwan was involved in a fight at a grocery store Friday. He said one of the other boys had a knife. The boys exchanged text messages over the weekend on who won the fight, and there was talk about a new fight. Jatwan then said he didn't want to fight again or get into a fight at school. After the shooting, Jatwan told the police he went to the woods to get the firearm before school because he needed it for protection. Jatwan alleged that at school, Bobby punched him in the face, so he did what he did and then ran to his math classroom. The firearm was in a book bag which a teacher moved aside as the two waited for police.
Lockdown, lockdown. This is an emergency alert. Please follow lockdown procedures. Go into the nearest room or building.
This was the most sickening experience of my life. It still gives me chills to this day. To think, I hadn't even graduated from school and entered the real world, but it didn't matter. Messed up stuff can happen anywhere at any time. Back then, I had a regular schedule. I went through a bunch of classes. Then at the end of every day, I had gym class. I liked having gym class at that time, as I didn't like going back to class smelling like BO or a whole can of deodorant. I'm sure that everyone knows that a locker room, especially a boys' locker room, is far from pleasant. One day, a Monday specifically, I went down the steps to the locker room and noticed the odor was especially pungent. With each step, the smell became stronger and fouler. I could hear the kids down there ahead of me shouting and complaining about how bad it was. Some of them laughing and blaming it on each other. I watched the face of every kid who came down after me hit the same disgusted expression. We all knew to prepare our noses for a smelly locker room, but that smell was something different. One kid said somebody must have taken a shit, while others said it smelled more like vomit, though none of us were quite sure. When we complained to the coaches, they were pretty dismissive of us. They said since it was probably just the combined smell of a bunch of sweaty people at the end of a hot day, or maybe somebody threw something rancid away down there, they told us to suck it up and change out, lazily promising us that it would be resolved the next day. Looking back, I can almost understand where they were coming from. It was the end of Monday. They were tired of dealing with a bunch of high schoolers and just wanted to go home. At the time though, we were all pissed off that we had to change out while basically holding our breath the entire time. Half an hour or so later, we had to brave the smell again to change back into our regular clothes. When we left, we realized our clothes had absorbed the smell while sitting in the locker room, so whatever that stench was, we took it home. The next day, word of the smell spread across the school. Every boy who had gym on Monday was talking about it. Even the girls were complaining that it had spread throughout the whole gymnasium. By the time I got back there, nobody could even step foot into the boys' locker room. The putrid air wafting out of it had reached biohazard status. You couldn't just smell it, you could feel it. Some kid even threw up as he walked onto the court. Finally, the coaches could no longer bear it either. They were forced to send us up to different classrooms, while the school investigated the source of the smell and hopefully got rid of it. While we waited, kids were raving about the situation, talking right over the teachers who were trying to maintain order. In the middle of all the confusion, the unimaginable happened.
What's going on? Everyone get down and be quiet!
Suddenly, things went from bad to worst case scenario. The teacher ran to the door and locked it, blocking anyone from leaving. He kept shouting at us to hide, but half the class wanted to run for it. It was utter chaos. He barely kept the students contained on his own. Nobody wanted to be a sitting duck, but then again, nobody wanted to paint a target on their back. The paralyzing truth was that not a single one of us knew what was happening anymore. Gradually, the surge of chaos died down, but the tension remained suffocating. We all hid. That was the first time I witnessed true, unbridled panic in a person. Yet it wasn't just one individual, but in almost every face around me. The fear was probably plastered across my face too. A couple hours later, with no explanation whatsoever, the lockdown was lifted and they let us go home. The school's lips were sealed tight. They wouldn't tell us a thing. We were left in the dark about the most terrifying day in our lives. A day that ended in a night of rumors, news stories, and speculation across social media, at least locally. The next morning, there was an announcement at the start of school. But of course, we all more or less knew the truth by then. The stench in the boys' locker room that this all started with, and the lockdown that followed were directly linked. The whole time, there was a dead body rotting in one of the lockers. It was one of us, a student. They knew that he had likely been killed by other students as a result of some feud or grudge, then stuffed into his own locker. That happened on Friday afternoon. By Monday, the decomposition was in full swing, and we had literally been forced to breathe it in, among many other things. It seriously messes with me to think about how long it took for that kid's body to be discovered. Nearly 5 full days. As far as I'm aware, the parents also got charged with neglect, as they said they thought he was sleeping over at a friend's house, but they hadn't been in contact with him for an entire week. Even worse, if another day or two had passed, his remains would have begun to liquefy and ooze out of the locker for all to see. This story was inspired by an eerie incident where a school in Pittsburgh's Morningside section was put on lockdown after a shooting victim was found deceased on school property. According to school officials, the man's body was found inside a blue car in the school's parking lot. Officials say a parent coming to pick up his daughter first noticed the vehicle, which was missing a window. The parent, who did not want to be identified, said he went inside to notify the principal. When they went back out to get a plate number to find out what was going on, they noticed 3 bullet casings on the ground and a black male slumped over the driver's side seat into the passenger side. The victim was 20-year-old Jordan Kearney from Pittsburgh. Police also say there was a report of shots fired in the same area around 11 p.m. the day prior, but there's no word yet if it was related. The school was put on lockdown after discovery as a precaution. It was lifted later on and students were able to leave the premises.